Hello. I hope this video can be interpreted on some level as an optimistic video. Um, I want to explore the concept of truth. Now, this is obviously something that can be very abstract and it can be a very, very comprehensive subject. I mean, truth is truth. So where would I start with a subject like this? Um, Truth is almost the state of being, the state of the way things are. So that's universal. Now, obviously, I'm not going to make a video talking about everything because I'm not God and can't talk about everything. But it somewhat relates to the previous video I uploaded about Liu Xiaobo, the Chinese dissident and Nobel Prize laureate who has passed away. I found myself getting very angry reading the comments from Chinese government apologists, people who think that he deserved the way he was treated. What Liu Xiaobo stood for was, of course, human rights and advocacy of peaceful transition to democracy. But more important, perhaps, than anything, he stood for truth. I saw one comment that was calling Liu Xiaobo an American agent, etc., the predictable sort of stuff. Now, the person who posted it lives in West Virginia, a Chinese guy who lives in West Virginia and was attacking Liu Xiaobo for being an American agent, in his opinion. Liu Xiaobo was a man. I'm sure he had his flaws, like all of us. But he spoke about things that the Communist Party have done, things that they shamefully have tried to whitewash from history. Well, they do whitewash from history, so far as the Chinese internet is concerned. And I know this for a fact. I mean, his very death is being censored. Like I said in the previous video, I typed in RIP Liu Xiaobo to my QQ account, the little header. It was immediately deleted and went back to the previous status, which was completely uncontroversial if I had written something like Destiny or something abstract like that. But sometimes I get very depressed. I get depressed with all the cynicism in this world, all the mindless cruelty. I get depressed with the behavior of dictatorships. I get depressed with never ending conflict. I get depressed seeing all this negative shit in the news. And all over the world, including in the UK, I'm depressed about the Grenfell tragedy. The thing is, in human society, we are used to being so opinionated and so keen to put forward our own ideas and views. And that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. I believe in it. That's what I'm doing right now. But it becomes a massive competition. What is truth? What is not truth? Then it gets into issues over media bias and media accountability and so on, which are extremely important issues. Now, in the case of China, and excuse me for focusing on China here, obviously it's only one example, but when you have a situation where the media is entirely controlled by the ruling party, you have no level playing field. So you can talk about media bias in the West, you can talk about corruption in the West, you can say all these things, but at least in the West there is a much greater scope for debate. That's something that is obvious. So when we're thinking about truth, it's something that I think, almost from a theological perspective, is something that can be maintained, that is pure, in the sense that no matter how much cruelty is inflicted, no matter how much ignorance there is, no matter how much human stupidity can seem to get in the way, ultimately truth is pure. There's massive unfairness in this world. There's massive injustice. And the sad reality is, with 7.5 billion people, it's unlikely that we'll ever see, certainly not anytime soon, a completely just world. Probably never. But I mentioned theology. I mean, I'm not trying to advocate any religion here, but in the long history of time, when we are all dust, everyone watching this video, the truth will still stand. Good and bad, the truth is what it is. Events are as they are. Things happen as they happen. History books are written. Opinions are made. And sometimes some of the greatest injustices do not get the attention that they should get. As far as I'm concerned, the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party should be as well known, as well documented, as widely spoken about as Hitler's Third Reich, which was a horrible regime. But in the very country where those things happened, they're completely whitewashed. Now that is tragic, but it doesn't actually change the history. It doesn't actually change the truth. So I guess what I'm driving at is that how truth is handled is extremely important, but it will never change what the truth is. So if a government chooses to censor something, it still doesn't change the fact of it. Um, I don't know if I'm making a great deal of sense with this. I'm just speaking freely and sort of saying what I feel about this. And it isn't just about China. I'm obviously thinking about China because of what's happened with the news regarding Liu Xiaobo, but this can be said of human society in general, all over the world, everywhere. I'm here in Britain, if we use Grenville as an example. What we know is this terrible fire took place, many people died. We don't know yet how many people. But that's history, that's an event, that is something that the fact of will never change. And it isn't just bad things, it's good things as well. Good things such as human innovation, human success, human development. You know, I don't want to be too negative. There's a lot of good out there. And that is also truth. But ultimately, the problem with truth is that as human beings, we cannot know everything at once. It's impossible. You could be a PhD professor. You're not going to know everything. No one can. But what we can do is try and be as objective as possible, to seek, to learn, to debate, to discuss, and yes, to challenge ourselves. To say, am I wrong about this? And yes, I have done it at times. I've often had strong views on things and thought, well, maybe I'm misguided with this. You'd be a pretty robotic person if you never ever done that. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Truth in itself is a pure thing, whether it's good or bad. What the facts are, there will always be debate, and there will always be a situation of injustice. You know, and that sounds like a very pessimistic point to close on. So I won't close on that. I'll say that I think the truth in itself is a good thing, negative or positive. In itself, it is fact. That is better than ignorance. It's better than I'm not explaining myself too well. There's nothing more honest. There is nothing more fair than the truth. I could put it that way. There is nothing more fair than the truth. What isn't fair is how the truth is handled, i.e., when there's bias, when there's censorship. But the truth in itself is just the truth. And whether it be mob stupidity, whether it be government suppression, whether it be ignorance, whether it be bullying, whatever way that is presented or handled, the truth is pure. And if there is an afterlife, I don't know if there is or there isn't. I'm not an atheist, but nor am I practicing of any mainstream religion. If there is an afterlife, then what happens here on earth, all the injustice cannot be um, fickle. It's terrible, but there has to be something better. So that to me is something that is very appealing about the concept of an afterlife. But I realize that I'm going into another territory with that. Anyway, for anyone who's feeling very depressed about the state of the world and injustice and cruelty and all the rest of it, that's something to think about. Truth itself is pure, and there is nothing more fair than the truth. The truth might be negative, it might be positive, but the truth is pure.